So there's this unwritten rule that in order to be a good teacher, you have to work a lot. Well, today we're going to be talking about whether or not that's true. So with that being said, let's dive in. So it was my first year of teaching kindergarten and my first year teaching in general when I first heard the idea that in order to be a good teacher, you have to work a ton of hours. You see, at the time, I had another person on my team, another kinder teacher in the school, and she had worked in the same district in the same classroom for over 20 years. And oftentimes she would get to work early and she would stay anywhere from 2 to 3 hours after work each day to get stuff done. And since this was essentially the person who was supposed to be kind of like a mentor to me, it wasn't long before that became the norm for both of us. Since she was doing it, I felt kind of obligated and I had a lot of work to do the same. And I still remember the day one day when I watched another teacher in our building leave with her husband, and she was walking down the hallway at contract time and she wasn't taking any work home. Now, to be honest, this was something she did pretty much every day. Every day she left at contract time with her spouse and they never brought work home. And a little backstory, this teacher was phenomenal. She was amazing. She was always meeting students where they were. She was getting amazing results in her classroom. She had impeccable classroom management skills. And I remember seeing her walk out every day at contract time without bringing work home. And I remember secretly thinking to myself, I want to become that teacher. And when my other teacher saw me looking or saw me watching, this or noticing this teacher walking down the hallway without bringing work home, she said something along the lines like, I can't believe she's leaving at contract time again. It must be nice. Clearly, she doesn't care about her kids like we do. And her kids, meaning our students. And from that point on, I kind of got this idea that in order to be a good teacher, you have to work a lot. And from that point on, I continued to work late, I continued to stay late, and the reality is, it honestly kind of led to burnout. So, in reality, this is a story we are told a lot. We are told by other teachers, maybe people in society, that in order to be a good teacher, you have to be available and ready to work at all hours of the day because what you do is what's best for the kids. And I've even had families maybe expect me to be able to FaceTime them at 10 o'clock at night to help out with homework, um, kindergarten homework, might I add. And the thing is, it's one thing to want to help your students and your families out of like the goodness of your heart, but it's a completely other thing if that's just kind of the expected norm from your families. So anyways, I followed this advice that my mentor teacher, my other teacher, had given me about good teachers stay late and work late. And can you guess the end results? Yeah, by the end of my first year, I was completely burned out. By December, I was questioning whether or not I had it in me to finish out the year. And quite honestly, I wanted to quit. Now, this wasn't something easy for me to say or even admit or think about because I had wanted to be a teacher since I was 5 years old. I grew up teaching my little brother how to do things. I had made him play school with me. I had graduated early with an associate's degree in high school. I had gone for my bachelor's and my master's. So the idea that I wanted to quit this profession that I had wanted to do my entire life up until that point practically was pretty crazy. And I remember the day that I got to kindergarten graduation and I decided one more year. I'm gonna give it one more year and I'm gonna see if I can find another way to make teaching easy. And like, long story short, I actually did. And I found a way to be that teacher down the hallway, that teacher next door, that teacher that other teachers judged because they are leaving at contract time because I don't care as much as other teachers do. And the reality, that's not true. But some people judge me for leaving at contract time as a teacher, but I don't really care. Because the truth is, I've had the opposite happen too. I've had some teachers stop me in the hallway. My coworkers notice me leaving at contract time and still being ahead at all times and asking me, hey, how did you do that? Can you show me how? And that's kind of what started this whole thing about me sharing online how I found my systems to consistently leaving at contract time. And so, let's go back to the question, do you have to work a lot to be a good teacher? And the reality is, the answer is, it's totally up to you. The question isn't whether or not you need to work a lot to be a good teacher. The question should be, what do you define as a good teacher? What does being a good teacher mean to you? And if nobody could be mad at you, and nobody could judge you about the way you were going about doing things, what would a good teacher look like to you? What would they be doing? How would they be showing up each day? When I did this exercise all those years ago, I realized that a good teacher is someone who's in the moment for her kids, who teaches every day and meets the students where they are at and notices those gaps in their skills to help them become better and makes students feel seen, heard, understood, and valued, and actually models what a healthy work-life balance looks like. And nowhere in that definition of my definition of a good teacher did I find that in order to be a good teacher, did you have to stay a ton of hours and work a ton of hours outside of contract time. That was not part of my definition. So going back to those questions is, what is your definition of a good teacher? Do you feel like in order to be a good teacher, you have to work a ton of hours? And then if no one could be mad at you or judge you, what would a good teacher look like to you? So now that we talked about the big question on whether or not you have to work a lot out of contract time to be a good teacher, let's talk about why working late doesn't make you a good teacher in my personal opinion. So the first thing is burnout. As I mentioned earlier, when I consistently came in early, stayed late, worked a ton of hours, I reached burnout. And it's honestly, burnout is one of the top reasons why teachers leave in the profession. Before COVID, the statistic by middle class or middle school dad was 1 in 4 teachers leave the profession their first 5 years, and the leading factor was burnout. And so when you are consistently working all those hours, you're not giving yourself the rest that you need to be a good teacher. And so that's the first reason why working late doesn't necessarily make you a good teacher, in my personal opinion. The second reason why working a ton of hours doesn't make you a good teacher is when you are exhausted, it lowers your quality of teaching in general. So when you're running on empty, you're more likely to be impatient. You're more likely to forget things and to be less effective in the classroom. You're more likely to be scatterbrained and not be in the moment with your kids and actually notice what's really going on behind the scenes on why they're not grasping that skill. And also, teaching requires energy, patience, and enthusiasm. As a primary teacher, I feel like I'm pretty much acting all day and I'm very animated. And if I don't have the energy to do that, my lesson and my engagement is going to suffer because of that. All of which, in general, is going to be impacted when you are exhausted and when you're burned out. So that's the second reason. The third reason is more hours does not necessarily mean more impact. A well-rested, focused teacher is far more effective, in my opinion, than an overworked, exhausted one. Your students need you to be present and in the moment, engaged and creative, and working from a space where you feel free and excited and passionate about what you're doing, not running on fumes and just trying to get by. And so that's another reason why working a ton of hours doesn't make you a good teacher. Another good reason is perfectionism wastes time. When I think back to all those hours I spent working outside a contract tower, I realize it had a lot to do with being a perfectionist. I held myself to an extremely high standard in order to get things done, but the reality is, Fixating on details that don't actually impact student learning isn't really that effective unless that's really what you want to be doing. And done is better than perfect. I like to prioritize high impact tasks over busy work. And when I mean high impact tasks, I'm talking about my classroom running activities. I've done previous content on classroom running activities. I'll make sure to link it in the description. But essentially, classroom running activities are the things that I have to do. I need to do on a weekly, monthly basis. Otherwise, my classroom's running on fumes. For me, this would be lesson planning, prepping, communication across the board. So those are the four main things I need to make sure I'm doing on a weekly and monthly basis to keep my classroom running. And if I'm fixating on specific tasks that aren't related to that, then that's not really effective. So that's another reason why working a ton of hours doesn't necessarily make you a good teacher. The next one is it sets an unhealthy expectation. If you normalize overworking, admin, colleagues, your students, your families may expect you to always go above and beyond, which is just not necessarily always possible. Your workload is never going to shrink unless you set boundaries. And the other reason why working a ton of hours outside of contract time isn't necessarily healthy or make you a good teacher is that students need role models for work-life balance. If you think about it, our students learn a lot by watching us and watching the people around them. And when they see teachers who are constantly working, they're learning that it's okay to work a ton of hours to make it or make an impact in the world. So the truth is, if we want students to learn healthy work habits, we need to be modeling them. A teacher who values their personal life teaches and shows students that life is more important or about more than making an impact at work. It's about making an impact in your personal life too. And also, when you are working a ton of hours, another reason why that doesn't make you a good teacher, in my opinion, is your creativity suffers. Great ideas, I find, don't come from a frantic, stress, and exhausted state. They come when I'm walking down the road, taking a walk, talking to a friend, living my life to rest and recharge. So taking breaks make you a more innovative and effective educator, in my opinion. And the final reason why forcing yourself to work a ton of hours doesn't make you a good teacher is that teaching is a marathon, not a sprint. If you treat every day like I have to race to do it all, then the reality is you're gonna have a hard time lasting your entire career. Sustainable teachers and teachers who prioritize their well-being prioritize balance so that they can keep making a difference long term. It's all about the long game when it comes to teaching. So now that we talked about the different reasons why working a ton of hours doesn't necessarily make you a good teacher, let's talk about what to do instead. The first thing is to get clear on your definition of what a good teacher is. If no one could be mad at you or judge you, what is your definition of a good teacher? What does that look like to you? Number two, decide if working late is part of your definition. Look back at the definition you just gave and decide if working late is part of that, of being a good teacher, or simply something you've been conditioned to believe because society and other teachers are telling you that. And then the third step, to take action. Start looking for ways to start leaving at contract time. In the upcoming weeks, I'm going to be talking about how to do this, and I'm hosting a free 3-day event called the Balanced Teacher Event, where I talk more into the practices and the systems I incorporated into my daily life to create work-life balance so I can have more time outside of work to dedicate to things like the present teacher. And then I also dive into specific strategies and specific systems I use in my classroom inside the Present Teacher Circle. The Present Teacher Circle is my community of new and first year teachers where I show you all the systems I use in my classroom. Everything from classroom management, lesson planning and prepping, grading, communication, and setting boundaries in the workplace. So after you've done that, remind yourself that you are meant to teach and your desires are safe guidance. It is totally okay to have a hard time balancing this, but that doesn't define you. You are meant to be here. You are meant to make an impact on those kids, and you don't have to give up your own personal health to do that. So let's wrap this up. In general, as an overview of what we talked about how teaching doesn't necessarily make you a good teacher because it, one, leads to burnout, two, exhaustion lowers teaching quality, three, more hours does not mean a greater impact, four, perfectionism wastes time, five, it sets an unhealthy expectation, six, students need role models for work-life balance. Seven, your creativity suffers. Eight, teaching is a marathon, not a sprint. And nine, we talked about what to do instead. And here we talked about decide on your definition of what an impactful teacher is, take action, and then remind yourself who you are and who you are here to be. So now that we wrapped up this whole content on whether or not to be a good teacher, you have to work a ton of hours outside of contract hours, let's talk about what your next steps could be. Make sure wherever you're listening and tuning into this content, make sure to subscribe because over the next coming weeks, I'm going to do a part 2, part 3, part 4 to consistently leaving at contract time. So make sure you tune in because you won't want to miss that. This is part 1. Part 2 is going to be coming out in the next week or so. The second thing is my Balanced Teacher event. This is a 3-day event where I talk about everything on how I create teacher work-life balance in my classroom and how I've helped dozens of coaching clients and other teachers around the world do the same. And I'm taking you step by step by step. It's completely free. So make sure to check out that link in the description. The third thing I highly recommend you check out is my prep guide. My prep guide has a ton of strategies that I use to consistently utilize my prep so I can leave at contract time without feeling guilty and without feeling behind. And what I love about my prep guide is I actually link to additional YouTube and podcast episodes so you don't have to go sifting through all my content. I realize I have a lot now. It really points you to those videos in particular and those podcast episodes in particular that I dive deeper into this topic. So make sure to check that out. The other thing I have for you is the Present Teacher Circle. The Present Teacher Circle is my specific community where I help new and first year teachers consistently leave at contract time by taking you step by step by step on what systems I'm incorporating into my classroom and what systems other teachers I've worked with have incorporated in their classroom to consistently leave at contract time. And one of the great things I love about this community is not only is it choose your own adventure, meaning you have access to all 11 modules right away. So you can really dive in and just start with wherever you're wanting help with. Let's say you want help with classroom management. I have a whole module on that, or lesson planning, or data, or communication, whatever you want to focus on. But I'm also incorporating a bonus of a book club. Now, if you haven't heard, in the fall and / winter of 2025, I'm going to be releasing my very own book that specifically talks about how new and first year teachers can leave at contract time and questioning the societal norm that good teachers need to leave at contract time. I really take you deep into my personal stories from my life and my experiences in a step-by-step way that I use to leave at contract time. And one of the things I love about this book club is I'm actually releasing chapters monthly. So you'll get a sneak peek to the book before I publish it. And I'm actually giving you notes on what I'm doing throughout this entire process. So if you want to write a book later, you have my process and all the contacts and all the things I used so you can make it easier for you. So definitely check that out. You get access to both of those inside the Present Teacher Circle. I'm really excited about both the content inside the Present Teacher Circle and the book club. And I really like how I'm joining these together. Oh, and if you're in the Present Teacher Circle, as long as you're still a part of the community when the book comes out, you're getting a version. I will send you / ship you a version of the book and I will sign it. So that's super exciting. So that wraps up everything in regards to whether or not you need to work a ton in order to be a good teacher. As always, remember, we are stronger together, and I'll see you in the next one, teacher bestie. Bye.